This is how close some working class Republicans are to Marxism and socialism. Does anybody have a list of all the big corporations with Marxist views? I want to make sure I avoid them. They all do, sadly. It seems we have no choice left but to abolish private corporations. It's the only way to defeat Marxism. I think you're right. MAGA people, you guys advocate for socialism by accident all the time. Why do you think the big corporations and the CIA and the FBI tell you that socialism's evil all the time? It's because they don't want the working class to gang up and do socialism. Stop letting them push you away from your own liberation because you're scared of a word.
Takes like that are a perfect illustration of how conservatives are more scared of buzzwords and terms than actual things in practice. So they want to identify the Marxist corporations. Think about that. Think about that critically. Marxist corporation. It's a good distillation of how ignorant a lot of people are and how they just blindly follow conservative talking points. And conservatives, to their credit, have done a good job smearing things they don't like as communist or socialist or Marxist. They know it leans into people's Red Scare tendencies and scares them away from anything even moderately progressive.
The Democrats are now controlled by the Jihad Squad, led by AOC, the little communist from New York City.
But when talking about corporations, that's just simply ludicrous because at its core, a corporation is not Marxist. What they'd really be upset about is a worker-owned collective engaging in commerce. But that's not what they're talking about here. What people get mad about on the right in relation to corporate behavior is basic hollow gestures to equity and inclusion. That's typically when you see this term trotted out. This cultural Marxism that companies like Disney does when they have a diverse cast. Like, who cares? Honestly, who gives it? But it's really good at riling up their base because it leans into their bigoted, hateful views. And they can just summarily smear all of them as Marxist because they know at the end of the day, their voters don't know the difference. But what this ultimately does is glosses over how corporations rely on social services to keep their costs low. And this video does a good job describing that.
Capitalism needs social services funded by the state because it is incapable of providing the necessary means of subsistence to its labor force. So you have food stamps and welfare and housing assistance and so on. Because the logic of capitalism necessitates that it reduces its cost of labor as much as possible. And in many cases, the state has created the conditions where that labor cost can go below the actual needs of the labor force. And so without homeless shelters and food assistance and things like that, you would just have a bunch of really pissed off, hungry people. And pissed off, hungry people have a tendency to throw Molotov cocktails.
So many companies pay people substandard wages because they know the government is there to foot the bill. Companies like Amazon and Walmart, and there are many more, have consistently kept their wages low, and that in turn has led their employees to rely on things like food stamps or other social safety net programs just to make ends meet. And that's not socialism. A lot of people like to say, oh, corporations love socialism when they get subsidies or when their employees rely on social safety net programs. That's really not, because at the end of the day, those workers are not controlling the means of production. But it does show how these corporations exploit our weakened safety nets to your expense, because at the end of the day, you're subsidizing their labor. Your tax dollars are helping their employees make ends meet. The tax cuts for them come at your expense. So when those corporations get permanent tax cuts thanks to Trump and the Republicans, that comes at your expense. And a lot of these corporations, especially big box stores, prey on people in red states. Typically, they're some of the few retailers in rural areas where a lot of people vote Republican, and sometimes it's the only job in town. So if those same people wanted to get ahead and wanted a better life, they legitimately would try to take on corporate power. So maybe those accidentally based takes are revealing a deeper problem in society.